welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duval, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who's been spending every waking minute supporting our boys keeping the peace in newly annexed Canada.
Tim Longo.
Hey, buddy, how you doing?
I wish I was being effective in Canada or something.
You're a lot closer to Canada than I am.
No, I just meant in the game. Like, yeah. I am not one of the boys.
You're not supporting anybody.
No. And you got the sniffles. So
I've got the sniffles, so I apologize. No, I'm a little nasally tonight, and also a little sniffling.
Adorable. You sound like a nice little sick toddler.
Yeah, that's me.
I've mentioned before that DLC does the same thing you do in the beginning of the cast. Okay, yeah. It's so hilarious that you have separately come to that same comical conclusion. I'll probably mention it 10 more times before we're done. But.
And I'll tell you again, it goes back to like David Letterman and stuff.
Yeah, no, it's and those guys are funny.
We'll just do this every few episodes so that people.
My memory's bad. You know I will forget.
I know you will.
Which is, case in point with Fallout. I kind of had a vague memory, not jumping ahead, but just a little bit. I had a vague memory of where the water ship was, but I kind of didn't really remember. I kind of had a hunch, and so I kind of lost my way for a little ways until I actually played the game and found, through the dialogue, found out where it was.
Right. It took me a little while to figure it out as well. Although somebody did mention it, and at that point I was like, yeah, but I wonder what's down here.
Yeah.
And so I actually ended up spending quite a lot of time once we got to Junktown, which is I guess where we started. I spent a lot of time following different threads and not really being satisfied by them and going back. So I spent a lot of time trying to defeat a Deathclaw and finally deciding that at level 5 or 4 I wasn't quite strong enough to do it.
So in pre-show you were saying you spent a lot of time in Junktown. You meant replaying threads to see what the conclusions were to kind of find one that you like.
Well, I would end up finding I couldn't progress significantly, and so I would just go back to an earlier save. There's a lot of stuff. I mean, there's a couple of different topics that we touched on. I mean, there is the sort of just purely how little this game directs you in terms of like you're safe here or you're safe there. There is one counterexample explicitly. There's a guy named Irwin or Irving, who's sitting in Junktown, and if you talk to him, he says, "Yeah, you're not high enough level to talk to me yet."
Yeah, I meant him too.
Come back when you have some more experience or something like that.
Yeah.
And I did end up doing his quest later, but it's maybe the only time where I was like, "Oh, I'm not supposed to do that yet."
Yeah.
Whereas I think a lot of the time I spent in Junktown was going, "Oh, I could try this, I could try that." I went all the way down to L.A., which I guess is the Boneyard.
I haven't gone there yet.
That was sort of one path I took. I spent a lot of time going in and trying to defeat the Deathclaw before I was really ready. My final approach was to go northwest, meet the Brotherhood of Steel, do their quest.
Oh my gosh.
Go all the way down to the Glow, which I guess is probably Las Vegas, and then come all the way back.
Whoa. You've done a lot.
And go into get into the Brotherhood and be able to get myself a set of power armor at like level 6.
Yeah, you mentioned that in pre-show. So tell us about how your speech specialization is going.
Well,
is that how you got it?
No, I think it's more. I have access to a lot of. I have infinite money, so anything I want, I can have. Which helps. I think the big thing with the Glow was just having some rad away. And when you're in there, there's actually some rad X, which gives you a big bonus to radiation avoidance or resistance. So you can go in there and get this thing. They need you to get something back from there and bring it all the way back. And that's like your your entrance exam to being in the Brotherhood of Steel. Once you're in there, then actually speech comes into play a lot more because I can actually convince people to let me do this or let me do that. Oh, hey, yeah, you could let me fix up that power armor. You could give me the parts I need. You could do, and I just kind of manipulated all that stuff in order to get the few things that I needed. I did have to significantly bump up my repair in order to actually repair the power armor to be able to wear it. And after that, the Deathclaw was a breeze.
Jeez. Yeah, that's amazing. So
yeah, I feel like I honestly, I'm having less fun, I think, than any other playthrough because there's having found these paths, there's not a lot of difficulty.
There's no barriers for you, really.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. I mean, I've stopped just buying everything that I want, except for a decorative rocket launcher. Because I
can't even use because you have 10%.
Yeah, I don't have the skills. Yeah, I don't have the skills for the rocket launcher, but it looks really nice in my inventory.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, as well as a few rockets.
Ridiculous.
I did have to dump everything, like a ton of stuff, into my followers' inventory because I couldn't carry anything once I put the power armor on because it's so heavy. It's like 60 pounds or something like that. So I ended up or 60 kilograms. I can't recall what unit they use. So I actually ran out of weight limit. I was had all these guns and tons of ammo and a million stim packs and super stim packs and etc. So I have all this stuff and I'm like, oh, I got to put all this somewhere. I'm not going to just leave it here. And I started dumping it into because I can just buy it back from him because
Oh, that's what I was going to ask you, is because I feel like in 2 they improved that interface, and I was like, there isn't an interface for just dumping stuff in. You can give it to him.
You can give it to him,
but then you have to buy it back. Yeah, but that's not a problem for you because I actually have to make a hard decision there.
But what to carry?
Because I may not be able to get it back from him easily because I don't have a lot of money. I don't know if our playthrough builds could be any farther apart than.
Yeah, so what have you been up to then?
Going back really quick before I hit that, I just wanted to reinforce the one theme that I wanted to talk about as well as just the directionless aspect of this game, which I remember and still do really, really love. Because I feel like. We were last episode. We were talking about, old Western RPGs, whether it be Ultimas or the Bard's Tale or what have you. And I don't know. I need to go back maybe someday and kind of refresh my memory on those. But when it comes to kind of having a sense of open world, to kind of stretch the term, and just having it really be the fact that you're describing all the places you've already gone just on a whim. Is I think a testament to that and the structure of the overworld that they have. Yeah. You can just go. Yeah, you can go to any square on that grid and just see what's there if you want to, and it's cool that there is so much freedom there, but it's just daunting.
And especially going from the Brotherhood of Steel and having them tell me about go get this thing in the glow, in the ancient something or other. I went, and it was another one of those moments oh my God, I can't believe how big the map is.
Yeah.
Because it's so far, and I'm watching the days tick by, and going back and forth was maybe a month of days, which was fine, because I had also paid for enough water to get to the vault to give me another 100 days on that quest.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I saw that too. I was wondering if that's what it would do. I didn't have the money, so there's no way I could have done it.
I think it was 1,000 caps for me because of a speech bonus, but it's 2,000 caps if you don't have that. So my build is really helping me out on a lot of this stuff. It's I'll just make the game easier for myself. And I'll make the game easier for myself. And although I don't think fun is always about challenge, I think my particular player type likes a certain amount of challenge. And I think that playing it this way, there's been times when I've been maybe I should just start over. Just do a different character.
Interesting.
Just to get some of the... Because I have played this a couple times before, and this has never been my experience where I felt this is, I'll just go try this. I'll go try this. I'll go try this. And it's all kind of equivalent.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think
except for going to the Deathclaw too early, that was definitely a thing that I couldn't do.
couldn't talk your way out of that one.
No,
or buy your way.
No.
Yeah, I mean, so I think my first two playthroughs back in the day were probably all. I tend to, so taking a step back as far as like my kind of build type that I tend to gravitate toward, I may typically do ranged, whether it be sniper kind of, a ranger in a fantasy RPG or what have you. As you know, like I'm a big fan of the ranger hunter kind of archetype. So I'm always ranged, I'm always min-maxing, and so I think both of my previous playthroughs, I either did, the first one I definitely did small arms and stuff and focused on rifles and such. And then the next one, I think all I probably did was focus on heavy weapons. It wasn't much different. It was just specializing in something that I just didn't interact with a lot the first time. So this time I've gone completely the opposite. And as I was telling Brett in pre-show, like I've chosen a build that I would never, ever normally take. And so it's been very uncomfortable for me. And I'm doing it obviously because I wanted a drastic experience. So I'm, as we talked about in the first one, I'm kind of a rogue archetype, if you will. So it's rogue / monk or something. And so I'm hand-to-hand, or I'm unarmed. So I'm just punching and kicking. And even though my small arms is probably high enough where I could probably, I'd get a couple shots in there if I were to actually use pistols, I'm forcing myself not to. So even though I have ammo and guns and stuff that I just typically sell, I'm not using them. And I have a high stealth, which has been kind of weird to figure out how to use that in this game because there's not a lot of good feedback on what you're doing with it, like,
whether you're stealthy.
Yeah, and if they're going to see you or not, right? It seems to be somewhat line of sight ish, and so if you sneak up on somebody from behind, then they definitely don't seem to see you. But then it's unpredictable because some things are on patrol, so you really can't control where the enemies are going to walk to.
Right.
So I'm basically just completely underpowered at everything because even though I've tried to boost up my unarmed, it's only to a point. I have brass knuckles, but there's nothing really that can really power me up that I've found so far. And so I'm up close and personal and just punching the daylights out of these guys, and one damage, 2 damage, 5 damage, and meanwhile, like Ian's behind me shooting his way through things, usually hitting me, and Dogmeat's in there trying to do. Dogmeat actually is the most effective follower I have.
See, and I don't have Dogmeat.
Oh, you don't?
Nope, just Ian.
Did you?
Just me and Ian.
Huh. So let's see.
Is he in Junktown? Where is he? Shady Sands?
Yeah, no, in Junktown, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember walking into one of the zones, and there was this guy and this man and this woman outside their house, like trying to scare a dog off. And so I walked up to them, and then Dogmeat just instantly started following me. And they're like, thanks for getting rid of this dog. And I didn't do anything. I didn't feed it. It just started following me. And
Cool.
you can't interact with him otherwise, so he won't leave. So the other thing that kind of, to jump ahead to a mini story with Ian, the other thing I'm doing is I'm not, with few exceptions, I probably only reloaded on something critical maybe like 4 or 5 times. I'm trying not to save scum anything. So I'm trying to live with my consequences, and I'm also playing a morally ambiguous character when it comes to what choices I'm making. I would almost always, as I think you know, play the Paragon, essentially, right? The complete like paladin of this.
That's normally what I play as, and what I'm playing as again.
Yeah, and we are both similar in that way. So I'm doing the good thing sometimes, but sometimes I'm like, I'm kind of whatever. I'm gonna do the bad thing now, or I'm gonna be kind of gray about it, just to see how that plays. I'm not being a total bastard, because some of the voice lines that they have, or some of the options, are really ruthless in their responses, and so I'm not going too far. But I'm trying to live with my consequences. So, case in point, the battle that I was having in to get to the water chip, Ian went down, and I didn't reload, and so he's dead now. And
oh no!
And he's my only source of ranged combat right now. So, and that's kind of once I got the chip, that's around the time when I stopped. And so I don't know how that's going to go for me, but
yeah, I think you're going to have a tough time.
I don't know. We talked a little bit about it last episode, but in the old days there were, I think you mentioned it, right? You mentioned bards in Baldur's Gate and stuff. There were always those builds that were kind of work against the game, and you got to really want it.
You got to really want it.
And this one, to the point of direction or lack thereof, and sort of the freedom that comes with that, but also the sort of anxiety that comes with that. I have no indication on how I'm going to do, like even some of the quests or the missions and such that we're getting, like helping the caravans out or something like that. I don't know how effective I will be in those, so I have to take them and then see what happens and know that like I'm going to punch my way through things. And usually I barely make it. So
yeah, what you want to find for yourself, I think, is the power fist.
So there is a cool big weapon for my fist.
Yeah, I mean it's not going to do anything like a rocket launcher, but it's as good as some of the best handguns. I think I want to say it's as good as like the 14 millimeter, which is what both Ian and I are using now for.
Okay, well there is something out there because I'm like I got brass knuckles, and I did take I made a mistake I think in one of my traits. I took finesse, which increases my crits but lowers my overall damage. And so as an unarmed, that's probably it's probably the worst trait. I don't know what my logic was. I was thinking, well, crits, like occasionally I'm going to get really lucky and punch someone's daylights out. But what I really need is sustained damage, and I'm just not getting it because of that trait. So
yeah, that's
jeez,
problematic.
It's comical because I'm whether it's I'm in the Necropolis or wherever, I'm just walking through these and just doing my best to survive so I can actually get to somebody who's shooting at me and then punching them and occasionally kicking them. It's just hilarious. And again, Dogmeat is just totally, I don't know what I'm going to do. I've already decided when Dogmeat goes down, I'm not going to reload. So
you're going to let him go down too.
Yeah. And that's like, as far as like dogs go in games for me, like that's like, that's verboten. Like I would never not reload if a dog went
Halo
down.
6, no dogs.
Yeah, right. No, there's no dog action in the Halo time. But, I just couldn't live with myself. So I don't know how I'm going to handle this when Dogmeat goes down.
Yeah. I've had Ian die a couple times, and I have, just reloaded and been like, I'm going to keep him around. Because death is final in this game, which is good, though I do like RPGs that have like a resurrect, and it costs a lot, and there's a different sort of course, cost is no object for me, but in general, it would be a big deal. So I don't know how I feel about that. I'm not crazy about it. Playing a Paragon type, I don't like to lose characters.
No, and I don't blame you for that. I think that's the way I would play normally. I'm just forcing myself. I think that's the right thing. I think they want followers to mean something in this game, even though they're, I think, I would say lightly implemented. There's just not a lot you can do interface-wise with them. It's all dialogue tree based, which I vaguely remember in 2 they improved a lot of that stuff.
Right. And that's actually a way in which RPGs have grown a lot in the last, 20 years.
Oh yeah.
Is that, and especially in BioWare RPGs, is that there's a huge amount of story and narrative that's built into, I played Dragon Age Inquisition, I guess, last year. And there are just, there's maybe a dozen followers, and you can get them all, and you can do all of their side quests, and then you can pick, specific ones to have a romantic relationship with. So it's just like this huge vector of story that was kind of untapped for a long time. I mean, was always kind of lightly there. You know, you kind of had a sense that Iolo the Bard had something else going on in his life. You know, when he wasn't around, you were Shimino, the Ranger in the Ultima games, you know, or whatever. But
wow,
it didn't really go that deep. Yeah, thank you.
No,
it didn't really go that deep, you know, and you that was a great direction for that stuff to start to take. Really, not I guess a little bit in Baldur's Gate, but it was really kind of in further games.
I feel like Baldur's Gate 2 was when I remember.
Sure.
BioWare starting to hit
Neverwinter Nights
starting to hit their stride in this regard. And then, you know, as another callback for our podcast, I'm just thinking of this now, but I feel like it took Western RPGs a while to catch up to that, the importance of that. And now, like you said, it's prevalent everywhere. And basically building out the supporting cast around the player character, which typically is the chosen one, you know, and is like, it's going to go and win, save the day and, you know, save the planet or whatever, save the land. And everything would focus on that character rather than the supporting cast. And I think that's flipped to some degree, which I think is a good thing. But then thinking about Final Fantasy IX, and I mean, that's the only one I've played, but I get the impression that the cast or the ensemble cast in the Final Fantasy games was maybe more highly valued or something because people tend to remember them.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
maybe the JRPGs were actually ahead of the game in that regard in sort of a similar era.
Right, and I think they were, and I think the trade-off there was that, you know, you had, you know, as we talked a lot about then, you had a lot less freedom in the character you played.
Yeah.
And
they're telling a story, a specific story.
Yeah. Right, and the direction that BioWare has gone is that the player character has kind of faded into the background, and other than being this special chosen one, doesn't necessarily have much of a story because they want to keep that as open as possible. And then, you know, the player's choices may impact what those background characters, those NPCs, will do for you. Mm-hmm. You know, how much of their story they'll tell, or, you know, it was very transactional to begin with. It was sort of like +1. You could literally see I gave them a gift and they liked me a little bit better. Here it feels more like my interests aren't really aligned with yours. I don't think we could be romantic partners. You know,
mm-hmm.
It's an interesting way for all that stuff to go.
So going back to
back to Fallout and Junktown.
Well, I mean, Junktown specifically, I wanted to ask you one question because I think we're probably going to be able to compare notes about a lot of the quests because we probably did a lot of different things. But with like all the Gizmo stuff, did you deal with any of that stuff?
I did. I supported the sheriff, the law and order candidate, and we took out Gizmo.
So I
blew him away.
So how did you? So he asked you originally to go in and kind of get proof, right?
Right, to wear a wire.
Right, and you
or plant a listening device.
Right.
I just wore the wire.
Yeah, and
because my speech was very high, I could just kind of talk him into stuff. Actually, before that even happened, one of the things that made me go after Gizmo was I rested in the hotel and had a midnight hostage situation develop.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was cool. So I'm asleep. The person who owns the hotel wakes me up and says, "Oh, can you help? Can you help? You know, there's a customer getting rough with one of the girls." And so I go and I basically have a hostage negotiation talk down with this NPC who has this prostitute that he is holding hostage. And because my speech was very high, I could actually get through all of that, get a huge XP bonus, like 1,000 points, but also then get to talk to her afterwards about Gizmo, for, you know, ultimately for whom she worked, and you know, and that kind of set me against Gizmo. Like, Gizmo doesn't even take care of the people who works for him. Yeah. He's like the Donald Trump of the wasteland. Yeah. So. So I decided at that point I was gonna back the kind of bland Law and Order vanilla guy.
Yeah.
You know, and do whatever needed to be done to get rid of Gizmo. So
Gizmo's
gone.
Yeah, I wonder if that probably isn't just like a speech thing because you have high speech. They probably didn't. You know what I mean? Trigger that quest only in certain circumstances.
Well, I think it's possible to try to shoot your way out of that.
Yeah,
I don't know if you could ever
or punch your way out. Maybe.
Yeah, well, maybe. Yeah, I don't think you'd be able to beat him to the gun as far as, I think he'd basically shoot first, and I think if you can't talk him down, there may be no way to get to the prostitute afterwards.
Interesting.
Her name, I think, is Cynthia.
Yeah, I didn't sleep. I didn't sleep in that hotel, probably because I didn't have enough money or something.
Yeah. I had plenty.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so it's interesting because my speech isn't high, and I also kind of probably meandered through the because I think the other thing I like, I guess, to make a point about the dialogue options you have with Gizmo when you're trying to convince him to confess, it's good. It's a good and bad thing. I love it because, as you mentioned before, like we talked about last episode, the thematic aspects of this game when it becomes, because it's more adult and it's more nuanced and there's some nice dry humor, but it's it's just very adult and kind of subtle, versus like a D&D type RPG, which tends to be more mythological or what have you. But here it's like I'm going through with Gizmo, talking things through with him, and it wasn't always clear to me, which dialogue option was going to get me what, Right, so I was just trying to role play basically, and meandering through that, I basically messed it up because at some point, and maybe it's because my speech wasn't high enough, there was no way I was going to convince him into confessing. Right. And so I chose something at one point. He's like, "Oh, it's on," and so basically they just start attacking, Right. I don't remember if Ian was with me or not. He must have been, and we basically took him out, and I killed Gizmo right there. And so then the problem though is that I went back to the sheriff, and he generally said good job. And then when I went to go talk to his first in command, or second in command, whatever, the guy said I didn't get proof, and they don't like murderers. And because I didn't get proof before I killed him, I'm basically banished. Don't come back.
Don't come back to Junktown.
Yeah, and so I haven't tried coming back yet, but I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I did a few other things in the town, but it was interesting that they had a scenario. They accounted for that scenario. And even though I wasn't intentionally being a bastard, it just was sort of like how it played out, and I wanted to, like I said, I'm committing to it playing out the way it's going to play out. I still was a little bummed that there was really kind of no way. Like, I kind of almost wish there was a way, like a secondary quest that I could regain their confidence, but it's a consequence, right? They're definitely into those consequences, staying in.
Big consequences. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a thing that at Bethesda we tried to carry forward with Tenpenny Tower and Megaton.
Yeah, that's kind of the ultimate example.
The only one, right? But it's it's a big one. I mean, I think that I do really like that. I agree with you. It would be nice to be able to get back, but that would to a certain extent feel too gamey for this universe. Yeah,
I take it back. I think I retracted because I
would love it in a tabletop role playing session.
Oh, sure.
If there was a way.
Yeah.
But I don't think the game can. I don't think the systems are there to make it possible.
It's just like they just have. It's just they would need a lot of permutations, right? They would need to account for too many things, and so I applaud that. I mean, I guess the other reason I retracted is that I think clearly whether it was explicit or not to them, one of their goals is that sense of living with your consequences, right? Because they definitely they close things off to you pretty clearly that you cannot go back on, and I guess the only bummer to that, which I do think improved over the series history, is knowing how dire your choices will be. So when you're making them, you at least can make an informed choice. I just don't feel like I'm always informed about what might happen.
Yeah, I mean, you would have liked to have had the option to back down. I mean, they do kind of tell you just going into town.
Yeah,
like
that's
it's
true.
It's okay to pull a weapon if you pull it second. Like, I mean, if somebody's drawn down on you, it's okay.
Yeah,
it's sort of Wild Westy that way, and I actually like that feel of all the towns of like, don't be showing around your piece and you actually have to put it away, or the guards will literally turn on you. I mean, I really like that feel. But you're right. I mean, it's not always clear. And again, that's this game not holding your hand. It's not always clear.
Yeah, it's cool. It's really it's a good reminder, and they even talk in Junktown. They even say we don't condone murder. I think like one of the first conversations you have. So they set it up, but it's subtle, right? Like you have to really be paying attention for that stuff. And again, I applaud that because I mean, it's like it just doesn't happen that much these days, And I playing this game has so much nostalgia for me. Just even in the ambient music in certain locations I forgot about, and now playing. And just now, like Necropolis specifically, remembering it kind of just somewhere deep in my subconscious. Just, oh man, there's so many, such a classic.
Yeah, no, it has been pretty fantastic. And having all those options, like I even forgot you could, that the towns were as big as they were, like that there were multiple screens.
Mm-hmm.
Like wandering around Junktown, and I'm like, is this all there is?
Mm-hmm.
And I went further south. I'm like, oh, okay. And then somebody mentioned Old Town. I'm like, Old Town? What the hell's that?
Mm-hmm.
And so I go back to the other part. And I'm like, no, this isn't it. And I start scouring the edges of the map. And I'm like, oh my god, there's another thing over here and another one over here. And it's just like grows and grows.
The hub is pretty big that way.
Yeah. The hub is what I mean.
Because that's where
I also found the Thieves Guild, which might be the first time I ever found that. I don't remember.
I don't think I remember. I guess I need to go find that because I'm a thief.
Yeah, that'd probably be a good
is
one.
Is that in the basement of one of those?
It's in Old Town.
Yeah, and
yes, I think you just go down a staircase.
There's a staircase, but I went down and it was a locked door there.
Right. Yes, and I picked that lock.
Interesting.
I had found a lockpick kit somewhere, and I picked that lock. And made my way through the traps and got to the back, and they gave me a quest. Like, here's what you need to do. And meanwhile, I went off and got power armor, and it's like, oh, you need to break into this person's house and steal their stuff. I'm like, in power armor? Really? I don't know if that's going to fly.
That's a good point. I wonder if power armor gives me a negative to stealth.
I haven't noticed any. I mean, my stealth is so low that I haven't tried to stealth anywhere. I did try to stealth up to the Deathclaw at one point just to see how close I could get, and it wasn't any closer. The thing is very aware of its surroundings.
I have a stealth question or stealth story to tell later on, but
okay. Well, no, go ahead, do it now.
Well, it jumps us to Necropolis. So if we want to talk about the watership stuff, you want to do that now, or do you want to?
Yeah. Let's go to that, and then take a break after it.
Okay, so once I started. Obviously you find out that the chip is likely in Necropolis. You get some hints from, I think, the water merchants in the hub, and various people are talking about how they seem to have clean water out there. So it's like, okay, I couldn't remember where the chip was from the previous playthroughs, so I kind of was meandering around a little while. And then I realized, okay, it's probably Necropolis. It was added. I do like that on the map they have the the locations are added as you discover them through dialogue options on there. So you kind of explicitly know, okay, this is an important location because it's been added to the map and I can click on the button, blah, blah, blah. Even though I could obviously just wander and explore over there and find it without talking. So I go over to Necropolis and not prepared and effective to fight a bunch of ghouls. So I kind of stealthed my way through that and avoided a bunch of them, and eventually got down into the sewers and met basically the friendly ghouls, and they told me about the chip and the pump and all that stuff, and so I'm fairly effective against all of the rat type creatures, so I was okay doing that stuff. A little unintuitive with the junk, though. I think it was the junk you find too.
Yeah, it's called junk.
Yeah, which is sort of like, is that what I need? So, I did eventually fix the pump through that after getting the chip. But then the stealth story I was going to tell is, there's the super mutants you finally meet up there. And
Larry and Harry.
Yeah, Larry, Harry, there's the three back in the back room too.
Three in the back room that I didn't speak to.
They also have similar names.
I talked my way. Past
you did, okay. So that wasn't an option for me. So you go into that one room with one of them. I forget which one, right?
Harry, I think. Yeah.
It forces dialogue, right?
Yep.
And you can't avoid that. And so, yeah. So okay, let me explain what happened to me then. I want to hear what happened to you.
Okay.
So I talked to that dude. He's forced dialogue, and he's like, okay, well, I don't know who you are, and you're not convincing me of much, so I gotta capture you. I gotta take you to my leader. So I end up in some installation someplace down underground that's all high tech with one of those robed characters, and they're interrogating me, and they want to know where my vault is. Did any of this happen to you?
No.
Okay, so they're interrogating. This didn't happen to me in my other two playthroughs as well, so this is all new. They're interrogating me, and I'm like, no, I'm not telling you where my vault is. I'm not telling you. And they just keep asking, and he just keeps punching you and knocks you to the ground and depletes all of your health. And to the point where you get down to 1 health, and he just punches you, and it just doesn't do any damage. So basically, it's a forced loop where you have to answer where your vault is. There's no way out of it. I did it for probably 10 minutes. I was like, nope, not telling you. Nope, not telling you. And and clearly there's no win situation. So it's funny that they would have scripted it that way just to allow you to, this is pretty elaborate because they reload you to a new location. It's
like a Metal Gear Solid game.
Oh my God. Yeah. I love it. And I'm like, I can't believe they're doing this to me. This is ridiculous. There's no way. And because I was already a morally gray, character, I was like, well, I guess it fits if I tell you where my vault is because clearly you're going to beat the piss out of me until I tell you. So I do that. The cinematic starts playing, pre-rendered cinematic. Never seen it before myself. And basically, it's showing how the game ends. The game is over. I tell them where the vault is. They show the cinematic of them basically the super mutants going in and laying waste to the vault, like killing everybody, machine guns everywhere, killing the overseer, all that stuff. And that cinematic starts with my character, I guess, wrapped in basically in rags, being lowered into a vat of the green goo and basically turning into a super mutant, I guess. And the game ends.
Awesome. And the game just ends right there.
It's like, yeah, game over. You lost. You made the wrong.
Wow.
You made the wrong decisions. And I'm like, well,
I've actually seen that before.
You have, okay.
One of my playthroughs, that all happened to me. It might have been my first playthrough, and I just reloaded the save and figured out what else I was going to do.
And I knew, and Bethesda carried it forward with the new ones as well. I knew there was multiple ending there, but this is coming a little early,
very early
for what I would call an ending, But it's an ending based on a dialogue.
It's like
choice.
a choose your own adventure book where you've made 3 choices and you're like, that's it.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I fell down a chasm and I'm dead.
Yeah, that's a good example. Yeah. So it was super fun to kind of go through that experience. So then my stealth story. Sorry, this was a longer story than I realized. My stealth story is that I was like, wait a second, how good is the stealth? Because I'm maxed out, like I'm at 100%. So what I realized is I could actually just walk by that guy and not trigger the dialogue because there's no way I was going to fight my way through that stuff. I couldn't talk my way through it. So I just walked by him, and it turned out my stealth's so good, I literally just walked right in front of him, and the dialogue did not trigger. I walked by all 3 of those other guys in the back. They didn't see me. I walked downstairs, got the chip, came up, fixed the pump, and walked out.
I basically dazzled him with my brilliance. I guess I told him first, he's like, wait a minute, you're not like the other dead things, the ghouls. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh no, I'm just dressed snazzier today, or something like that. And then he like presses you later, and I'm like, oh no, I'm a new kind of robot. And he just accepts it. Yeah, he just accepts it. Oh, okay, that makes sense.
That's hilarious.
And I just walked right by him. And then I just sauntered by I was a little worried that I wouldn't be able to get by the other 3, but I think that they only come out if you engage him.
Maybe they're backup, yeah.
Yeah, I think they're basically the muscle, the super mutant muscle. And so I did repair the thing, and I also got the water chip, and I actually brought it back. I went all the way back to the vault and did what's available there, which kind of launches into the sort of real story of what's going on in the wasteland. That this water chip quest is just kind of your entry into the bigger story of what's going on in Fallout.
So I haven't brought it back yet, and as I told Brett in pre-show, I've decided I'm not going to, because I actually didn't realize that there was an option that you could still win the game or finish the game and not bring it back, because I did it, I brought it back in my first playthroughs. So I want to see what's going to happen there, and I think it fits my character to do that. And you said one of your playthroughs in the past. I can't
remember. I'm not sure now if I am.
Oh.
If I'm thinking of the second one.
Oh no. Oh shoot.
I honestly can't remember.
Well, I will save. I still have quite a few days left. So I'll save, obviously, and just make sure. Maybe what I'll do is I'll just test it out by wasting all those days with the chip in hand and see what happens. And then, I just want to fool. There's a certain freedom because I've chosen to not play the way I typically play. I now feel like there's a certain freedom. Like there's the dude in the hub, the kind of the bad club owner guy, the criminal guy. What's Decker? Decker, who's clearly not a good guy. And I was like, I'll do the thing you want me to do. I would never, ever do that normally. And he wants me to go take some guy and his wife out, and which I probably won't be able to do. but I'm kind of working for, I'm being ambiguous in that. I'm kind of playing the rogue.
Okay. I've looked it up.
Huh?
If this quest is not completed before the time limit runs out, the game is over. So I must be thinking of the Gek.
They gave Fallout 2. Well, they got a lot of criticism for that in this one, I remember, right? And that there was that time limit, and I actually forgotten too that you could buy yourself more time with the water merchants, which was kind of cool. But yeah, in 2 they decided to make that more of a soft gate.
Yeah. I think you get a dream or something that everybody dies, and it's like, oh, okay, well, everybody's dead now. But in this one, I think it ends, and I think you get a video like the one you just described, where you see them all. You see the whole place just dying and drying up, basically, literally. So
Okay.
All right, let's take a break there.
Yep.
We'll come back. I have some feedback, and we got to talk about what's next in Fallout. And we'll do that, okay?
Sounds good.
Welcome back from the break. We're going to try to keep it short this time, both because I have a cold and we do theoretically like to keep it to around an hour, although we probably only ever had that happen once. What are we going to play next as far as Fallout goes?
Yeah, so as we talked about, because it can be a pretty open-ended game. There's still a lot, even if you've done the water chip stuff. There's still a lot you can do as you're maxing your character out and kind of leveling up, which I think is going to be kind of necessary to kind of play through a bunch of that extra stuff before you go to where they're probably going to point you. And so what we decided, looking at sort of the walkthroughs of things, is that if we basically play everything that's left except the military base and the cathedral. So maybe a little spoiler there on those names if you haven't found those places yet. But those are sort of like the higher level end game kind of sections. And so if, do your exploring as much as you want to, level up as much as you can before going to those locations. It looks like maybe you can go to the military base and do something and then leave and then come back. So I don't think it's like once you're there, you have to commit, but definitely don't finish those two until the third episode.
And for me, as I was saying in the break, there's a lot of NPCs that I just haven't talked to because it turns out they're actually important people, but they're not pointed out in any way. So I'm actually going to spend some time going back to some of the locations I've already visited just to kind of dig around and see if I can find that Dogmeat quest or whatever.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's Brett and I were talking about in the break. I think another interesting theme that's kind of surfacing for me that I really both love and hate. And we were kind of talking about the lack of hand holding that they do, but it's kind of a pixel-hunty kind of game in a kind of a good way, and that everything is, there's stuff that can be sometimes pretty valuable stuff just sitting on the ground, some in corners of places, and I've actually found myself heavily exploring rooms just to make sure I don't miss something. Like I found some books for like skill upgrades on the ground and stuff, and they're not in obvious places. And that kind of old school. There's no highlights. There's no easy interface for finding that stuff. And I think it's the same goes for talking to NPCs. Is like you do kind of have to scour if you want to find every important interaction. So it's an interesting callback.
Well, it's like we talked about with that UFO, at the beginning of the game. It's the sort of thing that only really diehard fans are ever going to find.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I think
without a walkthrough.
Yeah, I think I have the. In fact, I think I still have the strategy guide, which is how I found it.
Yeah,
back in the day.
Well, that leads us to feedback time. I wanted to. We got feedback through email and a little bit through a review. I mean, lots of stuff this time, and I want to get right to it. First, an email from Pat Holloman, who is TGDF Web on Twitter. He says, listening now, after hearing you guys discuss RPG elements, one concept I've used a lot is the idea of simulated skills. That is, in an action game, the player learns how to do things like use Ryo's Hadouken or power turns in Mario Kart, but in an RPG, the character learns those things. The skills are simulated inside the game. The player only chooses. This is a thing that Pat teaches to his students. And I think that's, that kind of gets right to the heart of it. I mean, in tabletop RPGs, it's the same thing. Players at the table aren't learning, whatever, swordcraft, blacksmithing. I mean, they're not learning these skills that they have in the game. They're simulated by tables and, and dice rolling and things like that. And that is a good sort of player skill, character skill divide that RPGs often are feature pretty heavily.
Yeah, I think the fantasy fulfillment of that with the no barrier of entry, right? Where it's like, I want to learn the blacksmithing skill in my mind, and so I'm going to imagine what that's like for my character to do that versus skill-based where if I want to be good at using this sniper rifle or something, then I literally have to become good at it.
Right.
And I think that's another reason why I've always gravitated toward RPGs is I like that I can, that barrier of entry for, it's really kind of just a time commitment thing in a way of leveling up to allow yourself that sense of pretending that you have that fantasy fulfillment, even though you're literally not blacksmithing.
Yeah, and often they're not, there's a difference too in that they're not often mechanically very deep necessarily.
No.
I mean, you can give a character dozens of skills, and all those really boil down to is dozens of tables in terms of what happens when you use them, which is not not mechanically very deep. Often you're just doing the same thing for any one of them. You're selecting an item from a list and clicking go, or hitting control plus a number. In this game, I think it's, or maybe I guess it's just the number keys for various skills. So you're really just pressing a key, to use a skill. So there's not a lot of sort of mechanical depth there in terms of on the player side. But then there's this huge simulation depth, which is kind of the opposite end of being very rewarding.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yep. Then we have Stefan Schmidt via Gmail. Sorry if I'm pronouncing either half of that name wrong. He says, "Hey guys, first of all, I'd like to say that I really enjoy your podcast and have a blast playing along. I played through Fallout earlier this year already, so I thought I'm going to do a completely different character this time. I chose 10 luck, 1 intelligence, jinxed trait, and it focused on unarmed combat. It's kind of interesting that I can't have a proper conversation and no one tells me anything. I hit a dead end after not finding anything in Vault 15 and no new location on my map, then stumbled accidentally into Necropolis on my search for Junktown. I'm curious to see if it's even possible to beat the game normally without dialogue options."
What?
Yeah, crazy.
That is crazy.
Yeah, if you have a really low intelligence, they won't let you into the Brotherhood of Steel. They literally won't talk to you. I mean, a lot of people won't. So it's like you're the village idiot. So they really commit.
Oh man, I hope he writes in to say what happens.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear the rest of this. He does say one quick thing about the time limit. The 500-day limit after finding the water chip was patched out at some point, is now closer to 13 years, if you guys didn't know already. So folks who want to search out a patch for this, go crazy. I'm playing, the original as is off the CD, and I will get it done in my 500-day limit. Then finally he says, as for speed runs, you might want to check out a run for Fallout, current record, and he gives a link. I'll put it in the show notes. It's not skill-based like Super Metroid, but it's still fun to see a 15-hour RPG get beaten in 5 minutes. So
wow.
I guess it's possible if you know exactly where you're going, and you probably, I would say, have high speech traits, you could probably get through this game very, very quickly.
Yeah.
So, thanks, Stefan. Yeah, tell us more of your adventures. One of the great things about RPGs is, as you've heard most of this episode, we've been talking about the different ways we've been going through it and the choices we've had to make because of our simulated skills. And then here's last one of email. Kevin Waters via Gmail says you can do that at devgameclub@gmail.com. He actually is going back to Super Metroid. And I think this is probably the last of the feedback we'll read on Super Metroid because we're starting to get a little distant. But he says, been really enjoying the Super Metroid chats. Listening to thoughtful people go through and analyze what is such a foundational game for me has been really fun. And there's a quote from a review that I really like. To this day, people continue to bend this level design through such capabilities as triumphantly acrobatic playthroughs. To this day, people continue to just play and feel that steadfast fizzle of reflexive and spatial responsibility. It's hard to think of anything else that's offered such a brand of malleability in environmental layouts and avatar. He goes on to say, I feel like Castlevania went on to not emphasize this particular blend of control mastery and micro-macro juggling. I think he's talking about sort of the level construction and things like that as much. I wonder what modern franchises and games do you think carry this particular torch on the best? Cheers! And then he says, P.S., other than Dark Souls. Which is the game designers love to lean on these days.
Yeah.
So, I had one right off the bat that I thought of, which is one of the best Metroidvanias I've ever played. I mentioned it, I think, in the cast at one point, and that's Guacamelee, which is has so much of what I loved in Super Metroid, and it is polished forward a little bit. You play this Lucador who has come back from the dead and now has powers, and you gain those powers over time, and some of the powers are a little bit silly, but give you essentially the equivalent of the morph ball. You can turn into a chicken and an egg. It's a very amusing game, but has some really impressive environmental navigation levels that are just challenging as all get out. There are ones where I thought I was going to cripple my hands to manage to do them, but I did. I got all the way through that game. I platinumed that game as well, so I got through all of it. And the combat is really good. It's excellent. It's all hand to hand. It's all melee type combat, so it's all close in. It's not a guns or anything sort of ranged. I don't think there's any ranged stuff at all. Although you can power up at some point and become the Super Lucador and be all powered up and all your punches land with more power and things like that. But good stuff. A lot of very clever ideas in that game.
Yeah, I definitely want to check it out. I don't have a good one coming to mind myself, but Ori's been talked a lot about, Axiom Verge and those, so I do want to check it out.
Also really good. I have played that as well. Though that one pushes I prefer, trophy hunting that involves finding all the spots, and Axiom Verge has got a lot of time stuff, like beat the game in 2 hours. I'm like, that's not going to happen ever with me. I'm just not that good anymore. But anyway. And then finally, I wanted to read an iTunes review from Moss Neotech Proto, if that is your real name. He says, if you want behind-the-scenes tidbits, then this podcast delivers. Just hearing about some of my favorite games from the perspective of developers is worth it. So thank you for that short and sweet review, Moss Neotech.
Very kind.
Appreciate it. So you folks who are listening now can also send an email or tweet at us or hit us up on the iTunes app reviews or podcast reviews. You can get us at devgameclub@gmail.com, as I mentioned earlier. Our Twitter handle is @devgameclub, and we are, of course, at www.devgameclub.com. I am at Brett_Duville, and he is
at Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
And I guess we'll catch you all in the wasteland next week.
And you did a great job sniffling through this. Thank you so much for... It's late where you are, and you're sick, and so, I really applaud you for sticking with it. Thank you, Brett.
Powered through, and...
we did it.
We did it. We made a podcast. Good night.
Good night.